Just trying to make it easy for you, Mr. Chair.
All right. It being 9:15, we'll call the committee to order, and we'll introduce the first bill. And we have the prime sponsor here. If you would, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Good to be with you this morning, as every Tuesday. For the record, my name is Senator Rebecca Perkins Polka, and I represent District 21, which is comprised of Portsmouth and the surrounding towns. I'm here to introduce SB 219, requiring the Secretary of State to enter into a membership agreement with the Electronic Registration Information Center, also known as ERIC. Established in 2012, ERIC is a nonprofit membership organization created by state election officials to help improve the accuracy of state voter rolls and register more eligible Americans to vote. ERIC analyzes voter registration and motor vehicle department data provided by their members through secure channels, along with official federal death data and change of address data, in order to provide their members with various reports. ERIC was created by state election officials and is controlled by state election officials. It allows for state election officials to use the reports provided to update their voter rolls, remove ineligible voters, investigate potential illegal voting, and provide voter registration information to individuals who may be eligible to vote. In terms of the importance of ERIC, its main component is the improvement of election security and keeping voter lists accurate. Enabling election officials to have up-to-date, accurate voter registration lists is key to maintaining secure elections. It is a nonpartisan, state election official-driven resource that helps build and maintain confidence in our elections. In using ERIC, voters can have confidence that the state's voter rolls are accurate and assurance that there are safeguards in place to protect the integrity of the state's election. ERIC also works to protect voter privacy with strong security measures in place to protect a voter's private information and data. Lastly, ERIC has a long history of being used in both Republican and Democratic controlled states, with election officials across the political spectrum from Texas to Rhode Island, recognizing the importance of ERIC in keeping our voter rolls accurate. On top of this, while ERIC is controlled by state members, a bipartisan group of both organizations and secretaries of state have endorsed states using ERIC to keep voter registration lists accurate and secure, including Heritage Foundation, Cato Institute, National Association of Secretaries of State, Secure Democracy Now!, the League of Women Voters, Republican State Secretary of State of Iowa, Paul Pate, Democratic Secretary of State Michigan, Jocelyn Benson, Republican Secretary of State Ohio Frank Rose, and Democratic Secretary of State of Maine Shanna Bellows. The list goes on. ERIC provides a secure and reliable vehicle to enhance our election security, keep our voter lists up to date and accurate, and will help build and maintain confidence in our elections, and is broadly backed in a bipartisan manner. In short, ERIC will make voter registration more accurate, safer, and improve our voter registration system as a whole. With that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from committee members? I have questions.
Yes, sir.
In there, you didn't talk about recent states that have withdrawn themselves from ERIC. Do you have any information on those?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I'm going to leave that to the folks behind me to address.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Secretary, do you want to go now or at the end?
I'll wait, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Tentarelli.
Thank you, Senator, for this opportunity to speak. I'm Liz Tentarelli. I'm president of the Nonpartisan League of Women Voters of New Hampshire, and we support SB 219. My written testimony is basically copied from the website of the Electronic Registration Information Center, talking about why it was formed. And I wanted you to have that in front of you when you deliberate on this bill later. What's important to realize is that ERIC was founded in 2012 by 7 states that believe using state-of-the-art data matching technology a robust and safe data sharing program built on widely accepted information security standards would improve their ability to maintain accurate voter rolls. The statement on the website also tells you that from a Pew Trust article in 2012, approximately 1 out of 8 voter registrations in the U.S. were no longer valid or significantly inaccurate. More than 1.8 million deceased individuals were listed as voters. This is a snapshot in time when the Pew Trust did this study, and it just shows the need for having a robust system of cross-checking state to state. And so I would hope that you will read the rest of that statement, and I'm going to leave it up to the other speakers to give you more reasons. Thank you very much.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Olivia?
Olivia Zink, Executive Director of Open Democracy, and I'm a voter in Franklin. You have testimony from my colleague Autumn in front of you. 20 states are currently enrolled. This helps keep clean checklists and also is a way for us to find cases of voter fraud if somebody votes twice. Utilizing 4 data source, ERIC provides members with identity deceased records, and other data sources. And so it's important that we know that this can help investigate possible voter frauds and voter fraud or double voting. Also efficient when states moved. We are the only state in New England that is not a member of ERIC, so we'll reference all of the other New England states. My favorite line in this bill is lines 24 and 25. I think it's a great way to pay for it, and I urge you ought to pass on Senate Bill 219. Happy to take a question.
Questions from committee members?
Sure.
Senator?
So I'm going to follow up on Senator Gray's question. So it looks like since 2022, 9 states have left ERIC. Louisiana, Florida, West Virginia, Missouri, Ohio, Iowa, Virginia, Texas, Alabama, and the trend seems to be continuing. How does that make the tool useful? And if that's the trend that more states are withdrawing, it's going to become less and less effective.
My understanding is it's the state's ability to join and a state's ability to withdraw. And so you've seen upwards of 35 states be part of this, and now we're at 20 states. I think that each state has that ability to decide whether they want to invest in this tool. It's important if we want to ensure that somebody from Massachusetts moves to Samberton, their name's removed from the Massachusetts roll or vice versa. I mean, that's what this tool is useful for. I would say that some states have withdrawn because they felt like, oh, it wasn't detecting voter fraud in the way that it had hoped for. I mean, there are multiple reasons why people leave. It could be cost. It could be that they didn't need it anymore, or the state chose not to. But I think our voter rolls are often political and not common sense. And this is a common sense solution to make sure that we have clean voter rolls.
Follow up?
But again, if more and more states are moving, you went from 35 to 22, that's what 13 states have been removed since its high of 35. Isn't that make it less and less effective if that trend continues, and for the state to invest into a tool that states are withdrawing from? Is that a wise investment for our dollars?
Well, we currently don't have any. We used to be part of interstate cross-check, but we currently don't have a tool to cross-check. So I think any tool is better than no tool at all.
Okay.
Senator?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You pointed out the Help America Vote Act of 2002. Can you explain that, what that is? What is that program?
Sure. That's a federal grant program and I believe New Hampshire has $12 million in that grant funds to use to assist in helping America vote. So the Secretary of State probably can explain more about how the dollars are used, but they're used to administer elections. They're used to purchase accessible voting equipment. They're used in many ways to assist voters in administering elections. So we can use the $12 million that New Hampshire has in our account. We get additional money for cybersecurity, or we got some additional money during COVID to ensure that we could handle elections. So that's just federal grant money that is given out to the states to help us vote.
Thank you.
My turn. What other requirements does Eric impose upon the municipalities other than providing their list and then when they get it back? What other requirements?
I don't know that they require, for municipalities, I'm not sure, but it does require the state to send a postcard to anyone that's not registered, explaining to them how to register to vote, which is a really excellent idea. There are a lot of Granite Staters that don't know how to register to vote. So it would just be a one-time mailer to explain to Granite Staters how to register to vote.
Are you sure about the one-time mailer? Because I thought it was periodically that they had to do it. Somebody's shaking his head up and down and back and forth.
I'll defer to Mike O'Brien to answer that question.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Olivia. And the next one on the list is Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael O'Brien with Pretty Strategies here on behalf of my client, America Votes. Here today in support of this bill. So it was about 10 years ago that we started the debate around interstate crosscheck. At the time, there were a lot of red flags around crosscheck, and a lot of us sitting at this table, or I guess one down the hall, were concerned that the data that crosscheck used was both not secure, but also not specific enough to be able to properly identify voters, and that the system would in fact collapse upon itself. And a couple of years later, that's exactly what happened. But in that debate 10 years ago, it became very clear that joining a system that compared the data between various states was important, and that making sure that our voter rolls are clean are important. And that was universal, regardless of whether you favored crosscheck or favored ERIC, which was still the program that at the time in 2016 we were saying states should join. It's clear that the goal is the same. Since 2019, when crosscheck did just sort of dissolve upon itself, we have not had a program that we have been enrolled in to help us make sure our voter rolls are clean. We have seen lots of different bills and lots of different efforts to fight fraud, supposed voter fraud that we believe can be detrimental to New Hampshire citizens, but we have not joined this very simple program that will allow us to compare this records in states, by the way, like Rhode Island and the rest of Massachusetts, the rest of the Northeast, where we see a lot of migration between New Hampshire and these other states, and so would be a very beneficial tool. As to the leaving of ERIC, there have been states that left. Unfortunately, in 2023, ERIC became a target of some folks who did not like the program, and some states, even after saying what a great program it was, did walk away. That seems to me to have stabilized, that I can see, and so feels like the program is set right now, and hopefully some of those states will see, since they themselves cannot find another solution, because let's be clear, there is not another solution to this. ERIC is the program that states are using, and there isn't really an incentive for states that are in it to leave because they like it and it works, to join a new one. So if someone, if another cross-check appears, there's not as much of an incentive to go to it when ERIC is available. That being said, to Senator Gray's question about the postcard, each voter gets one postcard once. And if you don't register after you get that postcard, you never get another one. So while if a new voter comes in, they might receive a postcard, so there might be another postcard, it's important to remember that and I remember having this conversation with Senator Gray a few years ago, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, and I am not going to register to vote. I'll get that postcard once, and I will never get it again. So it is not a reoccurring cost, and it will not happen over and over again. This is a simple an effective tool that we should be using to make sure our voter rolls are clean. And it is one without the cost of potentially jeopardizing other people's rights to vote. So we stand in strong support of this, and happy to take any questions.
I'll answer a question. I'll ask a question first because of your testimony. The last time that I looked into it, to the best of my knowledge, that postcard had to be sent on a periodic basis. Has the program changed, or is my memory faulty, or?
So, actually, thank you for the question, Senator. After we had this conversation a few years ago, we called the founder, Eric, spoke to him, and he assured us that it is a one-time postcard. Again, once an individual gets it the first time, they do not get it again. If new folks move into the state who are not registered, another postcard will be sent to someone new, but no one gets a postcard twice.
Senator Perkins Coca, you had your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify for the record, there have not been any technical or security or programming concerns raised with ERIC. In fact, a lot of the reason we've seen states withdraw from ERIC have seemed politically motivated in some cases, not even in coordination with their local officials.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Matt Munchin, is that how you say it?
Morning, Chairman Gray, members of the Senate Election Law Municipal Affairs Committee. My name is Matt Muscia. I'm a voter in Claremont. Excuse me. And I'm here representing 603 Forward, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization dedicated to educating, activating, and empowering young people in New Hampshire. I'm here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 219, which requires New Hampshire to enroll in the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC. As you've heard, I'll summarize, but ERIC has 20 member states, including Washington, D.C., and every New England state except for New Hampshire. And the majority of our movers are coming from our New England neighbors. And while there are concerns about some other states leaving, with all of New England remaining, I think that there are still benefits to be called out. And joining ERIC would improve our election security, streamline our election administration, and strengthen our voter confidence in New Hampshire. It's the only system that can effectively do the cross-check, providing New Hampshire with access we need to keep with the information we need to keep our voter lists up to date. And also, ERIC is cost-effective. While there are some initial startup costs, I think, again, we have to ask ourselves how much we want to invest in our democracy and what the costs we're willing to pay to have accurate, up-to-date information is. And I think it's a small price to pay to support our election officials and voters alike. New Hampshire has the opportunity with this legislation to modernize our elections, improve our election security, and by doing so, we can benefit all granite staters, making our elections more efficient, secure, and trustworthy. So I would take any questions, and I thank you for your time.
Questions from the committee? Senator Perkins Coca.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. So would you say this system supports the bipartisan goal of having secure elections?
Yeah, the states that are members, we are still supported by bipartisan election officials. And I think too, if we look to the local election officials, there's a lot of bipartisan support for joining ERIC. And also, I believe a 2023 St. Anselm College survey found that like 75% of granite staters supported joining a system similar to ERIC. So yes.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Secretary. Just check, see if there's anybody else.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Secretary of State, and I'm going to oppose Senate Bill 219 this morning. But I will say this, that, I have had conversations with my colleagues around the country, both Republicans and Democrats in a joint meeting. And the secretaries that I have spoken with that have been a part of ERIC have said that the information that they have received from ERIC has been helpful. The belonging to that program has become political in some areas, but that's not the primary reason why some of the secretaries of state of the states have left the program. The reason is because the administration of ERIC has been quite rigid in what they require to belong to the program. ERIC requires a data dump every 60 days of voter registration information, motor vehicle information, and information from other agencies. In addition to that, ERIC does require a potential voter outreach that is dictated by ERIC. So individuals in the states that are identified as potential voters require that the states reach out to those individuals to encourage them to register to vote. I'm not aware that it is limited to a single postcard. That may be the case, but I have not heard that that's the current practice. It's my belief that the states should be the ones that decide if, when, and how often they reach out to those individuals. It's a matter of individual state public policy, not some third party group dictating that to the states on how that should happen. New Hampshire requires that it's the confidential data of voters and drivers in the state have their data protected. And so I am very reluctant to enter any kind of a program where we would be simply giving that data away to a third party organization. So that brings me to the specifics of the bill that are really problematic. In section 1, Roman numeral 1, it says the Secretary of State shall enter into a membership agreement with ERIC to share voter information data along with relevant data from the Department of Motor Vehicles and other state agencies. I don't control that. I cannot enter into an agreement for giving away motor vehicle data. So that that provision right there is really problematic language in the bill. And then if you drop down to Roman numeral 2 on line 11, it says the Secretary of State shall ensure that any information or data shared between agencies is protected by security processes and protocols, and that any information or data that is of a confidential nature remains confidential. Once that information is given to a third party, I can no longer guarantee its protection. I'm happy to do that with the systems that we have in state in maintaining our voter registration database, and I think we do an excellent job at that. But once that data is distributed elsewhere, I cannot guarantee the security of that data. Getting to the use of HAVA funds, and Senator, just to update you a little bit, in 2002, Congress passed the Help America Vote Act, which required that all of the states engage in 5 items. One is to create a statewide centralized voter database, which New Hampshire did. It required that accessible voting equipment for individuals with disabilities be available in every polling place in New Hampshire. It required training for poll workers, education for voters, and then money made available for the enforcement of the federal laws related to HAVA. New Hampshire received, at the time, $17 million, and it spent about $5 or $6 million at the time to fulfill the federal mandates of HAVA. And then the legislature decided at the time that those funds would be put in an election fund, and only a small percentage of that money could be spent in every given year to continue to pay for the federal mandate required by the Help America Vote Act. And New Hampshire has done that. We spend about $1 million a year from those funds to maintain the requirements of HAVA, maintaining and improving the database. We just replaced our voter registration database last year. We're probably on our third round of accessible voting equipment, getting ready to move to the fourth level. And the way we have managed those funds, we have kept a balance in there that allows us basically to operate on the principle that that money is generated. Over the last few years, we've received additional funds for cybersecurity, running elections during the pandemic, and other items. So the balance has grown to currently about $15 million. We have committed to spending down probably $3 to $4 million of that money on electronic voting equipment, ballot counting devices, electronic poll books, which are being used in a lot of polling places at the current time. And now we're looking at new devices for accessible voting that can be used in both state and local elections. So we're getting a lot of bang for the buck the way we've managed those funds. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stop and answer any questions the committee might have.
Questions from the committee? Senator Perkins Coca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary, for being here. And, you know, I understand the concerns you're raising. A couple logistical questions. So with Eric, if the state were to enter into a membership agreement and join, you know, technically the state would be a member of Eric and help to administer it. So it would have some control to address the confidentiality concerns, correct?
My understanding is we would have a vote, but other states would have a vote also. There's no guarantee that lonely New Hampshire is going to be able to drive the policy at the national level that would apply to all states. I will add that with the withdrawal of states from ERIC, there have been new cross-checking programs that are beginning to form. And they are individual state agreements that are being developed between really adjacent states or regional states. It is growing pretty rapidly in the South. I expect that it's going to move further north. Late last year, I did have a conversation with the election director in Massachusetts, and she was open to some kind of an agreement between our two states. So there are ways to address the voter rolls other than belonging to ERIC. And I will add that the new voter registration database that we have constructed and rolled out has a lot of capability. The legislature is requiring more frequent verifications of the checklist, removing inactive voters on a more regular basis. We are using the Postal Service opportunity to, constantly check post office addresses. That's being built into the new voter registration database. Vital records is one of the divisions within the Secretary of State's office. So we have ready access to death data, instantaneous when it occurs in New Hampshire. There is a lag time when deaths take place of New Hampshire residents in other states, but there are tools that are being used to make sure that our voter rolls are being updated as frequently as possible, and we'll continue to work on that.
If I may, Chair. Okay, thank you for that information, because that was my next question, is sort of how is this work being done now? And I appreciate everything you just said, being work that's being done, and it does sound like a lot of work. It seems like that's the whole point of a system like this, is that it would sort of lighten the administrative load and try to make this a little bit more efficient. I understand the concerns you raised about sort of needing to share data every 60 days, but presumably, if up to 35 states have at one time joined this system, it does have security measures in place to protect against the confidentiality concerns you raised. So is it that administratively we have to sort of create the will amongst agencies to be able to prepare that data, because it does seem to be something that is a bipartisan goal to have our voter rolls up to date as possible. So I guess from an election administration perspective, it's hard to argue that having something that's more streamlined across states wouldn't be more beneficial to us than something that's just kind of these individual bipartisan agreements. Appreciating the effort you're putting into it, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. If Eric would be less rigid with the administration, if they would allow us to match data, then, and not actually give them voter data like we did with the interstate cross-check program, I would be open to that. And if they would drop the requirement of how outreach is made to potential voters and left that to policy of the state of New Hampshire, I would be open to that as well.
Okay, it's interesting to hear those points. One more follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair. And then I understood that we have several times had conversations about HAVA funds, and you did bring us over to the archives to see how those funds are being administered. That said, I do want to point out that these are pretty reasonable numbers. We're talking about in the fiscal note an initial fee of $25,000, potential yearly costs as low as $37,000, ranging to about $174,000. So these are not, this is not an outsized cost to kind of incur if this is a way that also saves our local election officials, who are trying to recruit poll workers, put in enough hours in the day, and are generally facing staffing issues anyway, a way to sort of support them more efficiently. So I guess I'd just be interested in your on the ground perspective on that too.
Yeah, my explanation was how we're currently
Yeah.
using the HAVA funds. I would agree that the amount that is in the fiscal note is something that we probably could manage within the $1 million a year that we do. But as you know, I'm very protective of that base amount, because that's the money that pays for all of the work that has to go into the maintaining the voter database, the accessible voting equipment. And I think when you had the opportunity to go to the archives and visit, you saw the work that was being done with that funding.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Lang.
I just want to make sure I heard something you said right, correctly. Is that you said that if we joined Eric, there's a mandatory data dump every 60 days of all voter rolls, but not only all voter rolls, every driver's license and ID we've ever issued must be delivered to Eric.
It requires a data dump every 60 days of, I won't say all data, but data from the voter registration database, motor vehicles, and other state agencies. In other states, other state agencies are involved with registering voters, and that's to requirements from the National Voter Registration Act, which New Hampshire does have an exemption from. But yes.
Follow up?
Follow up?
So my understanding, looking at New Hampshire demographics, that a vast majority, as compared to all the other 49 states in the country, Massachusetts accounts for 44% of our inbound migration of residents that are additive to New Hampshire, and you're already in conversations with Massachusetts to normalize some of that data and potentially do something with Massachusetts voters.
Yes. And I will say that the New England states are pretty good about notifying each other when voters cross borders and register to vote. The further away from New England that you get, the less that happens. But the benefit for us would be if we could have agreements with our surrounding adjacent states, and then places like Florida, where we know a lot of New Hampshire residents move back and forth from.
Thank you.
It is my understanding that state law currently on the application to register to vote has a block in there where a voter is supposed to identify their last state where they registered to vote. And also in state law is a requirement for I believe it's the Secretary of State, maybe municipal people, to actually send letters to that municipality, identifying that that person has registered. Is that true? Was my memory correct?
Your memory is excellent, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Additional questions? Seeing none. There was no one else on the list. Everyone on the list spoke. And the online, there was 261 in favor, 11 opposed. And with that, we'll close this public hearing and we'll open the next one in just a couple of minutes. Okay. All right. We look forward to your return. You can sit, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jessica, you ready? Okay. We'll
Members
open
of
the public hearing. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Senator Darrell Abbas. I represent District 22. Before I get into the details of this, I'm going to respectfully ask that this be re-referred. I'll explain the intention, what I'm trying to accomplish here, but I think the bill does need some work. When any property owner is denied a tax exemption, it's usually they find out about it through a non-public hearing. If they were to ask for reconsideration, that's also in a non-public hearing. And my attempt is to allow, if a person does request, and it would have to be at their request, they could have that reconsideration done in a public hearing. Sometimes what's on paper doesn't always present what's in reality. And I've come across that a few times. However, the procedure is very sensitive, and I don't think that the bill is draft.
I'm going to hold you up for a second. Usually, this is Senate Bill 220 relative to public hearings and deliberation on denial of tax exemption, and you are Senator Abbas from.
District 22. I did say all that. You just have, everyone said you had a great memory, Mr.
I
Chairman.
don't
What
remember
happened?
hearing the bill number. You know, I apologize if my ears need cleaning.
But in any event, I'm gonna, when I asked to be referred, some other considerations are that when it comes to taxes in general, there's a lot of personal information there. You know, there would have to be some expectation to perhaps keep some of the information still. You don't want people's social security numbers being made public. Also, you know, there's an argument to be made that by requesting this hearing be public, you're waiving that, some of that privacy. So I think we need to iron this out. The original draft kind of mirrored the procedure for zoning. I didn't find that to be necessarily appropriate, but still trying to work it out. So I'd hope you would re-refer it and allow me an opportunity to continue to work, and I can obviously work with some of the interested parties on this to make sure at least the procedure flows properly. Then we can talk to the policy. But without the right procedure, you know, this isn't ready for prime time.
So if I hold this bill until right before crossover, that's not going to give you enough time?
I don't want to say no, but I don't want to say yes either. Because when it comes to the procedure of this, you know, I think talking to a tax attorney, walking me through it, I also want to vet it through more than one board of selectmen or town council to see their thoughts on it, because towns operate differently. And if you set this procedure in place, you know, all the towns are gonna have to follow it, and I think it needs to be done right. If it's not done right, we'll have some bigger problems.
You've got about a month. Any other questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Committee Chair Gray and Senate members. For the record, my name is Jim Michaud. I'm Chief Assessor for the town of Hudson. As is my prior practice, I will usually testify in the technical aspects and administrative aspects of bills. I will say that the Hudson Board of Selectmen have not weighed in on this bill, and these comments are my own. In relation to Senator Abbott's request for a re-refer, I wouldn't want to jump in the way of that. I would support that. My written testimony, I would like to submit this way. Okay.
Yep.
And in the interest of time, I will let my written testimony be the subject of my remarks.
All right. Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's everyone that's on the list that requested to speak. Is there anyone who's changed their mind? And the online count for Senate Bill, it's not the right one. For 220 is 3 in support, 1 opposed. And with that, we'll close the public hearing and we'll open public hearing on the next bill in just a minute. Hmm?
Senator Abart's coming to introduce.
Tricia, you're texting Kevin now? Yeah, he's on his way. Thank you.
Jessica, are you ready? Trish, come on up. You're gonna get to at least start us, so we get on track.
Okay.
This hearing is on Senate Bill 225, requiring public notice before reassessment of property values for local tax purposes. And here to introduce is the deputy majority, whatever.
Hi, committee members. My name is Tricia Malillo. I am the Majority Caucus Director for the Senate. I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 225, requiring public notice before reassessment of property values for local tax purposes. This bill requires municipalities to give a 90-day notice for any reevaluation of assessed property, as well as a 90-day notice posted in multiple locations for any change in assessed value. And one of the notices is in a letter to the property owner for that. And with that, I believe Senator Avard is on his way. He can answer any other questions.
And he needs to get here toot sweet.
Okay.
All right, questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senators. For the record again, my name is Jim Michaud. I'm the Town of Hudson Chief Assessor, and my comments here are my own and not necessarily attributable to the Hudson Board of Selectmen because they have not weighed in with an opinion on this bill. Excuse me. I don't have written testimony, but my verbal testimony has to do with timing. So 90 days. Most reevaluations will be finished between September 1st and October 1st. Although there are some that the final results are done before September 1st, and others that will occur after October 1st. So let's just assume in mythical Town A that their reassessment gets done by the 20th of September. So they send out the final notices. In Hudson, we always send out notices of value in regards to reevaluation when we do a townwide reevaluation before the tax bill, right? We send out a separate notice, which is what this bill is seeking to require. But if you send them out September 20th, you can't issue a bill before September 20th. You can't issue a bill before December 20th. So you could be all ready to send your bills out, collect the resources necessary to pay your public safety, your teachers, the county, but you have to wait under the 90 days. I would argue the 90 days is too long. This is especially true in communities that run on a calendar fiscal year, right? They really need that second bill. And if they don't get that second bill out and start receiving that revenue, they're going to have to issue TANs, tax anticipation notes, and that carries an interest charge. Who pays for that? The local taxpayer. So I support the concept, definitely, of mailing out mailing out a notice of new value when you're doing a reevaluation. Certainly on the website, that doesn't cost anything. The social media, that doesn't cost anything. The mailing does cost. In Hudson, we support that. Public notice in the newspaper, there's some cost to that. It's not egregious. But I think it really comes down to a timing issue. And just to make it clear, this is when the community is conducting its 5-year, or it specifies 5-year reassessment. I would argue anytime you're doing a full townwide reassessment. So if you're a community that does it more than once every 5 years, I think it would make sense to have a requirement that there be a mailing to everyone within every townwide reassessment, townwide, not just the 5-year requirement. Most communities are at just the 5-year requirement because it is costly. And that's the extent of my comments.
Questions from senators? Senator Lang.
Sorry, talk to me again about timing. So again, it sounds like the assessment, who sets the timeline for when that assessment must occur? So you need that 90-day, you need to go out December 1. Why couldn't your assessment be done so that I'm sorry, as the tax bill goes out December 1, but you want your assessment would be required to be done and notice sent by September 1, if I'm understanding your statement correctly. And if that's true, then why couldn't the assessment be done so the notice goes out in August and would meet all the timelines? What is there any other state law that defines that timeline that says you can't have an assessment completed, by August to send notice out before September 1?
Thank you for the question, Senator. There's not a lot of reevaluation companies out there. There's less people doing the work now than at any time in my 30 years that I've been involved in this business. Communities can't find assessing contractor companies. This has been brought up at the New Hampshire Assessing Standards Board. This has been brought up at the NHMA annual conference. This is not a secret. So if we had the largesse of contractors to get all the work done, even then you might have issues trying to get it done by September 1st, right? So the values are effective for April 1st, but you're spending that entire, that spring quarter, right? You got to wait for the sales to occur, right? So it's market value as of April 1st. So how much work can you really do before April 1st? You don't have the sales leading up to April 1st yet. So you kind of got to do your analysis after April 1st. And if you can imagine a community, say the size of Manchester, right? That's an enormous number of parcels to have to revalue and provide all the support for. And that's frequently why you have the reevaluation results. You send out your notice of preliminary value sometime in July, August. Then you go through those hearings. Then there's possibly some rework, some changes in value as a result of those hearings. That takes time. It's all chunks of labor that builds up why it's really difficult to get it done by September 1st, especially in the larger communities. If I understand your question correctly, it becomes a volume issue.
Follow up?
Again, but the labor doesn't change. The amount of labor doesn't change. You still got to assess every single piece of property. The only difference is, do you assess it, let it extend into September, or do you back up your start date so that you could meet the September 1st deadline to send notice? Is that accurate?
I think I stated that April 1st is our assessment date. Mm-hmm. So we really have to wait for the sales to occur leading up to April 1st. When do we know the sales that occur during the month of March? We find them out when? After April 1st. So it's the calendar that is really dictating this. If we had a different assessment date than April 1st, if we had January 1st, then we'd be having a different discussion. 90 days wouldn't seem to be an issue. Down in Massachusetts, they have a January 1st assessment date. We follow an agrarian calendar by history of April 1st.
So one more follow-up. So understand, again, I want to understand the procedure. So right now, what's the notice requirement now? If you do an assessment and there's a change in value, is the notice the tax bill that shows up at the citizen's doorstep? That's the first time they ever hear that their value of their property went from $200,000 to $400,000?
So I thank you for the question, Senator. In Hudson, we sent out notices of preliminary value, and then we sent out the notices of after the hearings, right, what the final value is. So we sent out the notices before the final bill, and people do receive those. That's common industry practice. It may or may not be true in every single community that is done, I think that this bill points out that there is not a statutory requirement to send it out outside of the tax bill process. But I can just speak for Hudson. We do send them out well in advance so people would know. But we have reassessment that gets done and finalized with the final values during the month of September. You are getting into a situation where you have to literally delay the sending of the tax bill. I can't change the April 1st assessment date. That's not a subject of this bill. So we are dealing with a calendar structural item, and no one here is suggesting we should change the April 1st.
I'm still not quite clear. I'll make sure I'm clear on this. So again, Hudson gives how much notice to the citizen before their tax bill is finalized from a change in assessment?
So my recollection from the 2022 reevaluation was during the month of September, we sent out the final notice of value.
So roughly 60 days before the December 1st tax bill.
Roughly 60 days, notwithstanding the fact that there's many different facets that lead to the calculation of a tax rate, not just the value of property. But my argument is I think that 90 days is probably too long, and you might want to try something 30 or 45 would be more appropriate. Just looking at timing, trying to take into account all the different municipalities in the state, and again, those calendar year, fiscal year communities. You can't wish the work to be done quicker than it can be done. And I think I related the difficulty that we have in the assessment industry right now in New Hampshire, not just New Hampshire, by the way. We just don't have enough people doing the work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, we have another question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. And I just want to kind of understand this a little bit better in that you come from Hudson, full time. I'm assuming at Hudson.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Yes, full-time staff.
Okay, so I'm just you mentioned something that was brought to me as I was walking in the room this morning. In that some towns don't have a full-time assessor, and they have to hire people to do that. I imagine if you've got smaller towns out there that are using services, and many of these services are going away. What kind of if it's going to strain somebody who has, your full-time job, what is it? Is the strain exponentially more for an assessor that may do 15 different towns?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and you're correct. Most of the communities in the state are serviced by contracted assessing firms. I believe the work is the same in the sense of whether you're a 1099 or a W-2, you still have to get the work done. You're still limited within the structure of the calendar with the assessment date. And it might be easier to get a contractor to do a Southern New Hampshire community than to get them to travel up to the North Country, if I understand your question. Thank you.
Seeing no additional questions, thank you very much. Senator Avard.
Thank you.
Deep breath. Thank you, Senators. For the record, I'm Senator Kevin Avard. I represent District 12, and I am the prime sponsor of this bill. The genesis of this bill was because of certain circumstances that happened prior to the election, and I made a promise that I would put this bill in to my constituents. Not one, not two, but a number. So what happened? Well, we had an assessment in Nashua. And there were 2 assessments within 2 years. And we had only 7 days to refute it. 7 days. So if you were in Florida right now, when you got that notice, and you wanted to object to the appraisal amount, you're out of luck. You had 7 days to respond to that. The citizens of Nashua and throughout, they're concerned about surprise evaluations. Nobody knew this was coming. At least to my understanding, the people that got their reevaluation, they were like, what the hell just happened? I'm not concerned about the municipalities having to comply to this. I'm concerned about the seniors who weren't home, or somebody who was in the hospital, or somebody who never got their mail that could respond to the reevaluation. And yes, it was a company that was from Hudson, Massachusetts. They weren't even local. Nobody visited the house. They did it electronically. My concern is for the constituents. And I'm a little upset about, well, okay, you got to change your timeline, change your timeline. All we're asking is for a 90-day notice, work it out. Thank you.
Questions from Senator Avard?
So again, Senator, with your bill here, you would not oppose us changing the timeline as long as there's some sort of timeline established that's reasonable that gives the citizen enough notice that they could challenge or ask questions about the reevaluation of their property?
That sounds reasonable.
Thank you.
And just for the record, our local municipalities are trying to get rid of our tax cap. People are outraged. We have a spending cap. So when you couple that with the fact that you get these surprise appraisals, they're upset. And rightfully so, especially if you are out of town or you didn't get the notice in time to say, I want an abatement, or I want to check, what you did. 7 days? Surprise. Oh, some people came to me and said their property tax went up $600 a year. If you're on a fixed income, that's a lot of money. If you're on a fixed income, $100 a year is a lot of money. So, thank you.
Additional questions? Senator Lowe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. So the 7 days to respond, when was it that they got their letter? And what date was the 7 days?
I don't remember the date. I remember getting the letter. And it was like, you were reevaluated and you have 7 days to respond if you have any objections to it. It blew my mind. And a lot of the locals as well. So I made a promise. I'm keeping my promise. And I'm asking you to support this bill and let the municipalities work out their dates.
So follow up.
Follow up?
So in the letter, it in the letter said you have 7 days to respond.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Just check the sheet and just make sure there's nobody else signed up.
I signed up the last minute.
Well, he's going to get the sheet. You can come up. You can come up.
Hi, my name is Victoria Gullah. I live in Chesterfield, and I did not come to make any remarks on this bill, didn't know anything about this bill, but sitting and listening to the discussion, one thing I wanted, which really always kind of has surprised me living here, are the surprise notifications to people. So I'm a member of a couple of different town Facebook groups, my hometown and the town I live in now, and also larger groups in New Hampshire. And people are always complaining about the last minute surprises of their tax assessments, and especially in the past few years with those huge increases because of combination of property valuation increases and municipal spending increases. So I have been, not for a while now, but I was a licensed real estate agent in Massachusetts for 5 years and licensed in New York State for 5 years. Never in New Hampshire, I'm a stay-at-home mom now. But one thing that really prompted me to come into this seat was that they're doing the valuations for April 1st. So what my comment to all of you and to Senator Avard would be is that you have to look at that. It's not reality in real estate. The New Hampshire real estate market is a spring market. So that's only capturing your very, very early sales. And you're not having a fair assessment for the towns if you're cutting it off for April 1st. And most of the sales you have, we're a spring market, and a lot of people moving are families, and families stay in their homes until the school year is done. So you don't have closings in New Hampshire until the end of June. If you talk to the real estate association here, get their data, and you will see the bulk of closings are in June. So you're missing all that data for that calendar year. So to be on agrarian scale for property taxes makes zero sense. You want to have it be a yearly thing, and you want to reflect that spring market. And then you have another bump. There's a very big slowdown in the summer, and you have a bump again in the fall before Thanksgiving. And then at the very end of the year, you have those people coming in and scrambling for an end of your new home. And you have another bump right before the new year. They want to close at the end of the year. So to have it to be April 1st makes no sense for fairness. And I think also with the assessors, this is going to give them, if you just slide the whole thing, and the assessors can do their work more on a yearly basis rather than cram all their work from April 1st to September 1st. You can just spread it around. If the fiscal year is for the September, you're looking at the previous year. Like if you're coming up to September 25, you're going to be looking at the 24 sales. That makes more sense as someone who's been in the industry, and also just common sense. Let the assessors have that time to do their work, and that way you can get those notices out to the homeowners so they don't have surprises. That's all I have to say.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. With that, there was one additional person who signed up here, opposes the bill, did not wish to speak. And online, there were 8 in support, 2 opposed. And with that, we'll close the public hearing. We'll open the next one in just a minute.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of,
I haven't checked with the aide yet.
oh, I'm sorry,
Make sure they're ready.
You know,
getting ahead of myself.
I mean, I like you, but
He's the boss.
she's gonna give me
She's the
trouble
boss.
if I don't
She's the boss.
if I don't check with her. All set. All right, we'll start again. Prime
All right.
sponsor, you recognize to introduce your bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Senator Victoria Sullivan. I represent Senate District 18, which is Manchester wards 5 through 9, and the town of Litchfield. I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 223FN. I'm bringing this bill forward because my constituents have been very clear that they do not want out-of-state residents who temporarily live on our college campuses voting in our elections. The bill accomplishes 2 things. Line 3, number 3, removes college IDs as a form of identification for voting. Our laws state that a person must be domiciled in New Hampshire in order to vote here. The definition of domicile was decided in 1917 in the Felger versus Henderson decision by stating that fundamental idea of domicile is home. By home, as that word is used in the law of domicile, is intended what everyone has in mind when he thinks of home: his principal residence, the place to which he always intends to return, or the one place he thinks of as home. This bill intends to return is what is important in that statement, and that's the word home. If you ask a college student where their home is, they're likely to say where their parents live or where they have a home off campus. If the question to this answer is where is home is outside of New Hampshire, a student is not qualified to vote here. The definition of domicile for voting purposes is that one place where a person, more than any other place, has established a physical presence and manifests an intent to maintain a single continuous presence for domestic, social, and civil purposes relevant to participating in democratic self-government. College students would not be considered to be domiciled in New Hampshire under this definition. Opponents of this bill who say that this is a barrier to voting or is in some way voter suppression are making irrational emotional arguments. My son lives in Manchester with our family. He attends school in Boston. He stays on campus throughout the year. With the exceptions of Christmas and spring break, he comes home for summer. He voted in New Hampshire via absentee ballot in the last election. It took less time to vote absentee than it would have taken him to stand in line to vote on election day. If college students can figure out FAFSA and college applications, they can certainly navigate how to vote absentee. The second action this bill takes is to establish in-state tuition for students who can verify eligibility to vote in New Hampshire. In order for a student to be qualified to be considered a state resident and therefore qualify for in-state tuition, they must have lived in New Hampshire for at least 12 months prior to registering for classes and have non-educational purpose for living here. Why do colleges have a stricter standard for in-state tuition than we do for in-state voting? If colleges believe that this is a student's domicile based on the aforementioned definitions, they must also extend in-state tuition to those students. St. Anselm College posted on their website that the New Hampshire election law provides college students with a special privilege when determining where they vote. A college student in New Hampshire may choose his or her voting domicile, either the domicile he or she held before entering college or the domicile he or she has established while attending college. Why do college students have special privilege? Maybe this made sense back when we relied on the Pony Express to deliver mail and therefore votes, but requesting an absentee ballot and receiving one is an easily accessible practice for every student. New Hampshire colleges go to great efforts to help students register to vote in the state, even when it's not their residence. It would not be a heavy lift for colleges to instead help them to vote absentee in their hometowns or home states. The intention of this bill is to incentivize colleges to do so. There's another issue with student voters, and this is from vote.gov. Are you already registered to vote in your home state? Notice they call it home. But want to change to your college state? Most counties do not require you to cancel your registration when you vote. So if students don't have to cancel their registration in their home state when they vote, how do we know they're not voting in two places? Vote.gov acknowledges that home of the college is not their campus. College students are wonderful and welcome members of our communities here in New Hampshire. We all hope that they fall in love with our state and choose to make New Hampshire their home after graduation. But the fact remains that New Hampshire is a temporary residence while they attend school. They go home for summer vacations. If a college student chooses to stay here throughout the year, either for work or an internship, and go through the process of obtaining a New Hampshire driver's license, they should, of course, be allowed to vote in New Hampshire elections. It's time that we have a clear understanding of voting rights of our out-of-state students who attend school here and should be voting absentee in their home states. It's time that we respect our citizens who have spoken very loudly and clearly that it is time to pass this legislation. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the senators? Let me try to form one.
Okay.
You read us 654-1, and 654-1A is the thing that talks about a student may choose their college as a domicile. You said that we have a special requirement or a special privilege for students. When does that other person that moves to the state 7 days before the election and says, I want to vote here, why would there be a difference? I mean, I believe that there is no difference. If they say, I woke up this morning, I want to move to New Hampshire, and they come in to vote, that seems that there isn't a difference.
I think there's been some controversy about that as well, that people would like to see that changed. But the difference is intent. The intent, it says the intention to stay. And so if you're moving here and you intend to live here and make this your home, your intention is to stay and make this your home. And that's what it says in the law. It's your intent to stay. College students don't have an intention to stay. They're looking at that year of college, that 4 years of college. They go home. And if you ask a college student, where are you going on break? I'm going home. They don't consider this home yet. If they stay and they choose to become a citizen of the state and they get a driver's license and they do the things that other people have to do to become eligible voters in our state, then they should, of course, have that opportunity to vote here.
And the word intent is important because I do not have the ability to look into your head or anybody else's head and know what your intent is. But at what point in their life do we take them at their word? This is where and per 654-1, intend to interact socially and civilly, etc. It seems like denying them the right to register to vote would be the special thing and not the way we're doing it now.
So no one's denying them the right to register to vote at all. They have every right to register to vote in their state. They have every right to vote absentee. It takes only a few minutes. And as long as they call that home, that's where they should be voting. And again, it goes to intent. When you move into a college dorm, you bring your clothes and some sheets and a blanket. Your bed is already there. Your bureau is already there. You are not bringing things that are going to be there for long term. You're not bringing your furniture. When you move into an apartment, you move into the state, you're supplying your home. You're supplying the articles in your home, not just the things you can pick up and take home on the weekends, but actual solid things. You're establishing a home.
And where does that, in 654-1, where does it say I have to move my dresser?
It says you
Where
have to
does
have an
it say-
intent to stay and make this your home.
Again, I think that, any other questions? Senator Lang?
I'm going to go to the first half of the bill, right? So the first half of the bill talks about in-state tuition for our university system in New Hampshire and our community college system in New Hampshire. So so from the simple reading of those two sections, what you're saying is that if I've moved here, I registered to vote, which is equal, I'm declaring residency. Those students in the following year are eligible for in-state tuition. Is that the intent of the bill?
Yep, because they would also have to get their driver's license to do the other things that are part of becoming a resident here, right? They're establishing a residency. They're not just here on the college campus for a part-time stay.
So again, as I look at the bill and I'm looking at I'll use section 1, the last sentence starts on line 6 and ends on line 7. It says, to receive an in-state rate, such person shall submit to the board proof of registration to vote prior to the beginning of each academic year. So that doesn't talk about driver's licenses or anything else. It just says if I register to vote in my community as a college student, that automatically makes me eligible for in-state tuition in the following year. Is that the intent of the bill?
Yes, and the reason for that intent is to help incentivize colleges to be able to, they go through a lot of effort to register voters in our state. It's on every college website. They have big events where they bring the students out to register to vote, and they do it to vote here. So if they can do the same thing and help them register to vote absentee in their own state, that would be great. But if they're doing it to let them vote here, the college themselves are saying that they are residents here, and if the college is saying they're residents here, then they should give them the in-state tuition.
One follow-up.
Certainly.
So again, I'm trying to get, so if the students made the decision, right, this is a student decision, right? They've made the decision to vote here, as compared to vote in their home, right? Residence, whatever you want to call the other location that they're at, that they have a driver's license from potentially, right? I guess I'm trying to struggle with the idea that they haven't gotten their driver's license. So they haven't established residency for the purpose of your car registration, the purpose of all the things that say, I'm here, I'm going to stay here. They haven't done any of that in the following year. And yet the mere fact that they voted here and they've created a carve out of home just for the purposes of voting, you think that should do in-state tuition because of.
Well, so the student ID would no longer be used as an ID, right? So they'd have to have a state ID to be able to vote. So if they have done that, then they are residents here and they're able to vote.
Thank you.
Additional questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Mrs. Stanfarelli. Oh, she said she did not want to speak. All right. And Olivia.
Good morning, members of the committee. For the record, Olivia Zink, Executive Director of Open Democracy, a nonpartisan nonprofit, and I'm a voter in Franklin. This bill seeks to restrict the rights of students and rolls back forms of identification. Out of 36 states that currently have ID requirements, 12 do not allow some form of student ID. Also allowing students I think it's important for us to think about what our participation rate is. There's only 27% of Granite Staters that are 18 years old that are registered to vote. So we actually don't have a huge high percentage of students, we're below the national average, who participate. Also, in the wake of this bill, I think it's important for us to think about what about a college student who is blind, who may not drive? What other restrictions do we have? Additionally, Article 11 of the New Hampshire Constitution, Part 1, Article 11, says every inhabitant that is 18 years old has an equal right to vote in this election. This bill singles out young people. Also, data shows that 18% of 18 to 24-year-old do not have a state photo ID. So there are 18% of young people that don't have a driver's license yet. I was tabling at Manchester Community College before the election, and some of them take the bus to go to college at Manchester Community College. So I do think that we shouldn't make an assumption that every voter has a driver's license, because not every voter has a driver's license. Please find Senate Bill 223 inexpedient to legislate so that every Granite stater has the ability to exercise their right to vote. I'm happy to take a question.
Questions? Senator Lang.
Thank you. So do you think it's right that a student who has a residence in another state, driver's license, in another state, and may be receiving financial aid from that other state, but votes in New Hampshire to impact our elections? Do you think that should be appropriate, or should we encourage them to vote absentee instead and vote in their home state where they receive financial benefit and have a driver's license?
Oftentimes we'll get a question like that from a student, and I do urge them to request an absentee ballot and explain the process of requesting an absentee ballot. I do think that our law does give students the choice, and students have to recognize that they do have the choice to register where their college, I mean, if a Franklin voter said to me, I registered to vote in Franklin and I'm going to UNH, do I re-register in Durham, or do I request an absentee ballot in Franklin? I say to them, request an absentee ballot. It's very simple. This is how you do it. But you do have the choice to register. I will say that when I was a college student, I was registered to vote in Franklin, and I went to Durham. And then after living in Dover in an apartment, I decided to register to vote there because that's where I felt like my civic life is. So I do think that, we allow people in their nursing home to register to vote from their nursing home or their home. So we're in a sense doing the same thing for young folks with this law. But this bill doesn't change domicile. This bill just takes student ID out. So we're not actually changing domicile registration in this law.
Well, again, I understand that, but again, my question was, do you think it's correct or proper that, again, a student who receives financial aid from a different state, has a driver's license in a different state, is allowed to vote in New Hampshire? Do you think when absentee is with our military, right? We have military is actively has, you have a voting information officer whose responsibility is to help you get your ballot from wherever you're deployed, whether it's your local ballot or whether it's your deployed ballot. If you've declared in military, if you've declared residency at your post, then you can go vote at your post. But you've declared residency, you've got your driver's license, you've done all the things that a normal average resident citizen of a state would do. But it seems like for colleges, we're talking about something different. We're saying, we're not telling you have to go get your driver's license, you have to go register your car, you have to go do that. But you can vote here, and my question is, do you think that's right? Not what the law is. I'm asking you, do you think it's right that colleges or don't emphasize more like the military, that they have a voting officer that says, let me help you get your absentee ballot. And instead they say you can go right down to the Franklin Town Hall and register right there to vote.
Yeah, well, we don't have a college in Franklin, but I think that I think that this bill doesn't actually address that question you were asking about domicile. This bill talks about whether a student can use their student photo ID in order to exercise their right to vote. So I think your question goes to a different part of our law around domicile and residency than this bill. This bill really just talks about whether you can use your student identification to prove identity. And I think that if a student doesn't have a photo ID, if something has their name and their picture, they should be able to use it to prove identity in order to vote.
Sure. Last question.
Yes, sir.
So again, so the first half of the bill, first two sections of the bill, which is the vast majority of the bill, talks about in-state resident tuition. Do you think a student who votes in New Hampshire should be eligible for in-state tuition?
No, I think that's a huge cost to our university systems to allow that. I think that there is different standards for proving in-state tuition, and the university uses a different standard than registering to vote. So I think that that's up to the university system to determine. And but I think there should be other standards, and probably use some of the current standards that universities use.
Thank you.
Just to kind of follow up on that a little bit, it seems kind of counterintuitive to me that a student has been recognized by the university system of New Hampshire of not being a resident here, but then on the same token saying, but it's okay to vote here. Would you agree with that? That's a counterintuitive statement.
I do think that there was a Dartmouth student who had a lawsuit, and I can't remember the exact court case, but the Dartmouth student's parents had moved and they no longer had a residency, and they were able to.
And I understand Dartmouth is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the New Hampshire university system.
But I
we have in-state and out-of-state tuition, and the university system is recognized legally that they are not a resident, and therefore they have to pay a higher amount. Yet we're saying it's okay to vote here.
Let me break in for just a second. Full disclosure, I am the Senate's representative to the University System of New Hampshire Board of Trustees. And what the university's policy is that if you come to the state of New Hampshire for educational purposes, that you will be charged out-of-state tuition until you have a break in your education of at least 12 months between semesters or whatever, and then at that time you can be reconsidered for in-state tuition. Okay, so it's two separate things that are going on. Okay, and the requirements for the university system don't have anything to voting, and why should voting have anything to do with residency tuition or not? Okay, so again, just wanted to clarify that, make sure that I'm on the record, you know, that I am the Senate's representative to the trustees. So
Thank you, Senator. And
I
so
just
back
wanna-
to my question.
Yeah, I just want to, so hypothetical, the Massachusetts family sends their student to New Hampshire. That Massachusetts family then moves away. They move to Texas. I don't know. They move to Texas. That student no longer feels connected to Massachusetts to request an absentee ballot. They have no documents that say they live in Texas because they don't feel connected because their family moved away. They feel like their home is now in Durham. So what happens to that student? They have a constitutional right to vote. They're 18 years old. They're a citizen.
And I'm not denying that.
So I do think that and there has been legal precedent with the Dartmouth case, where that scenario happened, where the parents moved away and they didn't have anything other than Hanover to call home. And so I think that you do have to sort of look at those situations of students do have the right to vote. And as Senator Lang said, there's choices involved, and that's a different section of the law. But I do think that we have to sort of ensure that they have their constitutional rights.
Follow up. How many cases a year do we have where the parents move in the school year and these kids are without a home?
I don't have that data, but I do know that in our school district locally, we have a lot of transient families in our school district. So I do know in K-12 there's data of how many families move, and it's a considerable amount of families that move throughout the year. I don't have data on higher education.
Thank you.
Senator Lang, excuse me, Long.
Thank you, Mr.
Got my
Chairman.
O's and A's messed up here.
So what I'm hearing you testifying to, that this one size fits all, one size doesn't fit all, that there are unique situations that would be disturbed through this.
Yes.
Okay. And with respect to college students staying in state, I know I had my child went out of state and voted out of state. Didn't vote in the state of New Hampshire. When he was 18 years old, my home wasn't his home. So would you agree that, well, and you know, we've got data that shows that kids graduating high school going out of state normally stay in that state. My son stayed in that state, unfortunately. So it's, so when I move out of my home to go to school, people ask me where I'm from. I'm from my home. But as far as it is my home, is it not considered, would it not be considered my home? Because it's my parents' home. I'm 18 years old, I'm out.
I think that there, as you say, there's not a one size fits all model to this. I mean, I have a 15-year-old daughter who is, can't wait to go out of state for school. Will she want to request an absentee ballot from my home, or will she want to re-register to vote in that new state that she goes to school in? I do think that each scenario is different. And remember that only a percentage of students go on to college. There are other students that may choose to stay at home at 19 or may choose to get their own apartment. So what happens with other, I think there's lots of life circumstances that are impacted by this, and especially the 18% of folks that do not have a driver's license that will no longer be able to vote if college identification is removed.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Rachel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Rachel Dean. I'm the Durham Town Clerk Tax Collector. I'm also here as a representative for the New Hampshire City and Town Clerks Association. And I'm going to offer you a unique perspective because we are the community that sees student IDs often. And we have a large portion of our population that is attending the university and voting in our community. I am here speaking on behalf of our association, so the City and Town Clerks Association, and as an elected official for the town of Durham. I oppose SB 223 for these specific reasons. And before I start, I want to make sure that the committee understands that we're not talking about voter registration, and domicile is nowhere in the language of this bill. We're talking about student IDs, being specifically college and university student IDs, being used to obtain a ballot on election day. So the student has already gone through, they've already been vetted, they've already proven that they're domiciled, that they're over 18, that they're a US citizen, and and their identity, that they say who they are. They've already gone through that step. That's a complicated process. And now with new laws on the books from our governor, it's an even more stringent process for a person to come in and register to vote in our community. So students already gone through that. You think about airport security, they've gone through customs, they've cleared customs, they're coming up now to vote. This is when they're approaching the ballot clerk and they have to show a valid ID to get their ballot. We're not talking about domicile. Domicile is muddying up the waters here a little bit. This is specific to when they get their ballot. The language in this bill is just specific to that. So I'd like to really focus in on that. Durham is not aware of any fraudulent use, has never been investigated, or no claims have been substantiated on fraudulent use of student IDs to obtain a ballot. As far as I'm aware, we've never been investigated by the Attorney General's office. We've never been investigated by the Secretary of State's office for the use of a student ID to obtain a ballot. What is a student ID? What's on it? What does it look like? It's a very locked up and secure form of identification. It has a picture of the student. It has their name. It has an issue date. It has an expiration date. It has a barcode. That security piece, the barcode, is very locked down. You can't replicate a student ID. It's not that easy to do. The student ID gives them access to the dining hall, to their housing, to university facilities. So it's very secure, and it does its purpose. It shows the ballot clerk, as a person comes in, we've all voted. When you go in to vote, you state your name, you state your address out loud. The ballot clerk repeats your name and your address. And if you pass that test, then you're handed the ballot. This has nothing to do about domicile at all in this bill. I want to address the senator's comments about absentee voting. Absentee voting is under fire in our state. In my community during the presidential election, we were at our polling location until 2 a.m. because we had a series of agents come in that challenged every single one of our absentee ballots. It's not as secure and as easy as folks thinks it is in the state of New Hampshire. I can't speak to other states, but in our state, there is a movement that is against absentee ballot voting. So that exists. That's a real thing. The consequences for removing a student ID as a way for a person to get a ballot disenfranchises a class of voters. This is really important. I know that it's been dismissed and pushed aside as not being valid, but it is. Folks, let's remember, who are the students? They're first-time voters. Some of them don't have their driver's licenses. Some of them don't have access to do that. So we're targeting a specific class of people that makes me really uncomfortable as an elected official that helps register people to vote. We're saying, hey, it's okay for this group to get their ballots, but you know, I'm so sorry. You can't get your driver's license. You're not in the military. You don't have time or money to go get a passport. So we're going to exclude you. I'm so sorry. We can take a high school ID, but we're not going to take your student ID. And again, look at RSA 659:13, Roman numeral 2A. That is what we're talking about. That's what this bill is challenging. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Victoria.
Hello again. My name is Victoria Gullah. I live in Chesterfield, and I'm here to pretty much support this bill. I do think that if they're going to strike the college ID, they should also strike the high school IDs. I'm from New Hampshire. I did mention in the other testimony that I was licensed in real estate in other states, but I was born here. This is the place I voted. And when I first registered to vote, and I went to school at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, in Quebec. They have a lease law there, and when I had my dormitory, I actually had a lease. It was the Quebec lease law, so I actually had a lease for my dorm, believe it or not. And then I lived there 1 year, and I rented apartments for 3 years. And strangely enough, I was never allowed to vote in Montreal in municipal elections or provincial elections or federal elections. Isn't that strange? Why is that? And you go, oh, it's another country. Well, you know, I wasn't established there. I didn't become a citizen. That's the parallel we're talking about here. You know where I voted? I went to the Hancock Town Clerk in August of 1992. I turned 18 in 1991 for the other lady, she left, who claims that, oh, only, 25% of 18-year-olds are registered to vote. Well, duh. You know what happens every 4 years? People are born, right, in tranches before the election. We have elections every 4 years. So are those 18-year-olds going to register right when they turn 18? No, they register for the election. So she said 25% are only registered to vote. Well, yeah, because it takes 4 years of our election cycles, because most people don't vote in off-year elections, to actually register. I didn't register to vote when I turned 18 in 1991. I registered in August 1992 before the election. And I went to the Hancock when we had supervisors of the checklist. And I registered there. I got my ballot. I was a little nervous because the Canada Post had a strike. And am I going to get my ballot? I did. I voted in the election. That's how I did it. It's pretty simple. If the lady who was the clerk in Durham if all these students can come in and present all this ID to her, they can do it in their home states. They could do it in their hometown, because why should someone from Hancock go to UNH and vote in Durham? Why should someone from the second CD be voting in the first CD? That's with their in-state tuition is based on their hometown, which might not be in that congressional district. It's not in that Senate district, state Senate district. So why should they be voting there? They should be voting from their hometown. So the whole reason to get, I feel, to get rid of the student ID and the even a high school ID is that you want to have your ID from where you live. Where, if you don't have a driver's license, where would your driver's license be? And I had two grandmothers who voted. They were born, one was born in 1906 and one was born in 1911. They never drove. They never got a driver's license their whole entire lives. You know what they had? They had state IDs. And they used a state ID. And so any argument that someone doesn't have a driver's license, that's the biggest BS I ever heard, because anyone who can't drive for any impairments, blindness, lack of sight, maybe they've lost their sight after they were a licensed driver and they can't renew their license, someone who's had head injuries and can't have a driver's license anymore, they get a state ID. It's very simple. So the whole idea of saying they don't have a driver's license, who cares? You don't have to drive. And then she's saying if you're blind, it's easier to vote. Why would it be easier to vote if you're blind to go in person to some place you're not from when you could get the absentee ballot? So all of these arguments are just ridiculous. The whole thing about, oh, I wrote a note. What did I want to say? The other lady talking about people whose families, a student from Massachusetts, whose family leaves Massachusetts, and that student is at UNH or Keene State and feels no association with Massachusetts anymore, no association to, her example was Texas, where the parents moved, and so they feel now they are associated with Durham. Well, what happens to people in America when they live out of the country and their parents moved and so you register to vote your last place that you lived. Maybe that's where you grew up, and maybe it's the last place you lived. Now you're living internationally. I have a cousin who's lived in London for like 20, 30 years. Does she feel connected to Staten Island? No. So, but she votes there because she's a U.S. citizen living in London for 20 years. She has like almost like no connection to Staten Island, New York, but that's where she votes because that's the last place she had connection. So for a student from Massachusetts at UNH or Keene State, when their parents leave Massachusetts, it's their last place. It's this, so you have to follow the logic. And the way we allow out-of-state students to vote, or even out-of-town students, you could be, like I said, from the second CD going to UNH. You could be from the first CD and going to Keene State. That's not your home. I live like this far
Victoria,
from.
we need to
I will wrap it up.
get back to what the bill says.
Yes. The IDs, that's what I'm talking about. You follow the logic of everything else. And the logic that New Hampshire uses, that you can use an ID to vote, a student ID to vote, makes no sense. It doesn't follow any logic anywhere. It should be your driver's license from where you are. All these students with off-campus housing, I drive by them at Keene State. I live 2 minutes from Keene State. All the off-campus housing, it's full of out-of-state drivers, out-of-state license plates. There's no connection. And they're voting and even in our local elections, and it really disrupts things. So that's my testimony, is to please work with this bill. Also, again, get rid of the high school IDs, because why should like a year 13 student at Phillips Exeter or St. Paul's who's from out of state, why should they vote here? They shouldn't. They're on their, with their parents. They're going home to the parents. They're here for 1 year, then they're out of here. So why should an 18-year-old at Phillips Exeter, Phillips Exeter or St. Paul's or wherever, Holderness, vote here? It doesn't make any sense at all. So please consider amending the bill to get rid of the high school IDs.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. I think we lost your other half.
She had to, there's another bill. She had to be asked. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Provencher. I serve as the chancellor of our state's university system, and I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on Senate Bill 223. We have some written testimony, that's making, that's making its way around. Our significant objection to Senate Bill 223 is in section 1 of the bill related to in-state tuition. I am not going to weigh in on voting rights. We encourage all of our students to participate in civic life and vote. But that is not a policy for the university system. That's a policy dictated by the legislature. However, there are statute currently provides our Board of Trustees with the authority to set in-state tuition, and we follow the law. We follow the law with in-state tuition, and we follow the law with transporting students who want to get to the polls. But I do take strong exception to allowing the law and proof of registration to vote tied to in-state tuition. When I read this, actually, this would say, if we had New Hampshire residents who did not register to vote, do they not receive in-state tuition? The bill says, to receive in-state rates, such persons shall submit to the board proof of registration to vote prior to the beginning of the academic year. Now, again, we want to encourage everyone to vote, but there may be New Hampshire students who don't register to vote. I will also add, should this pass, this would add quite a bit of administrative burden to the university system in obtaining proof of voter registration for in-states to receive in-state tuition. I will tell you, at a time where the university system is trying mightily to reduce its cost structure, in the face of headwinds with demographic challenges, we are respectfully requesting in every piece of legislation that we're testifying on, if it's going to add administrative burden, we are generally not supportive of that. And lastly, I will say, and again, after Senator Sullivan's testimony, it did click for me a little bit. This doesn't say that out-of-state students are going to receive in-state tuition, because theoretically, if you are registered to vote under this bill, you couldn't be an out-of-state student and register to vote, I think. But again, the fact that we're going to tie in-state tuition to proof of voter registration is very problematic for the university system. If we were going to allow all out-of-state if the law will continue to provide out-of-state students the ability to vote, this would have catastrophic financial consequences for the university system. $100 to $150 million. So we take strong exception to section 1 of the bill. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Would you check to see if there's another list? Will and Armida? Just pull a second chair up to the table.
Oh, let me get out of your way, sorry.
No worries, thank you.
Good morning. We would like to thank Chairman Gray and the members.
You need to introduce yourselves first.
Okay. I'm Will Nelson.
And I'm Armida Mirkaremi.
Good morning. We'd like to thank Chairman Gray and the members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today. We're students at Dartmouth College, but equally as important, we are committed, civically engaged voters in the great state of New Hampshire.
On campus, we run the Dartmouth Civics Association, a nonpartisan organization committed to helping community members and students exercise their constitutional right to vote. Annually, we invite everyone from the surrounding town to come hear from candidates for local office like select board, school board, and other municipal offices. In partnership with the town of Hanover and Dartmouth College, we've spent over 300 hours sharing hundreds of pamphlets of information about how to vote in New Hampshire or how to vote in your home state via absentee balloting. We help students learn how to vote regardless of their political views or partisan affiliation. This past fall, we hosted the chairs of both the New Hampshire Republican and Democratic parties to speak with students on campus. We also connect them with resources so they can help make informed voting decisions. As a result of our partnership with the town, Hanover saw one of the smoothest voter registration processes in the state this past election cycle.
In our experience, students want to know how to vote, how to follow the law, and how to get involved in New Hampshire. Often, the main barrier is knowledge of the voting process, and we work hard to bring that knowledge to students. We work very closely with town officials, and it's our goal to make their lives easier by making the guidelines for voting clear. We hear consistently from town officials that we are saving them time and effort and worked hard to make sure everyone knows and abides by the rules. And changing the requirements with no clear reasoning will make that much more difficult, resulting in more work for those town officials.
Not only is the in-state tuition portion of this bill vague and unclear, the removal of student identification cards in the voter registration process creates a significant burden on town officials and organizations like ours. In Hanover, student ID cards are an integral mechanism for the verification of a student's right to vote. Town and school officials rely on student IDs to verify a student's address on campus.
Time and time again, the New Hampshire Supreme Court upheld that students have the right to vote in the granite state. Voting is not just our constitutional right, it is the glue that holds our communities together, the fuel that drives the engine of our government forward. Chairman Gray and members of the committee, we hope our testimony demonstrates student commitment to safe, secure, and lawful elections. In Hanover, we have fostered a strong partnership between the town and the college, working hand in glove to civically engage. Thank you for your time today.
Questions from the senators? Senator Lang.
Do you happen to know what percentage of Dartmouth students end up ultimately staying in New Hampshire?
That is not data that we have readily available, but just speaking from anecdotal experience, I know a lot of people my age who were impacted by COVID stay 1 to 2 years afterwards in Hanover, still engaging with the college because of the disruption that the pandemic caused.
Follow up?
What percentage of Dartmouth students vote?
We don't have exact figures on that, but we were only able to estimate what election day voting was for students voting at the precinct at the Hanover High School, and we estimated there was about 2,300 voters. And our overall undergraduate population size is about 4,800 students. So it's like about 50% voted in Hanover on the day of the election.
So again, so 50% of Dartmouth College students voted in New Hampshire
Yes, this past election cycle.
this past election cycle. Follow-up?
Follow up?
What's the in-state versus out-of-state ratio for students at Dartmouth?
Again, that is not information that I have off the top of my head, but happy to provide additional testimony to make that clear.
Thank you.
Later.
Additional questions?
Can I ask one?
Yeah.
Kathy, can I ask you to see if you can gather that same data for you and for the university system? What percentage are in-state and out-of-state? What percentage of the students voted?
I can tell you that it's about 50-50 in-state and out-of-state, and we don't track the votes.
For the record, she said that it's about 50-50 in-state and out-of-state, and they don't track who voted, since she was not at a mic. All right. Senator, no? All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to sheet 2. Sam.
Speakers.
Is this on?
Yes, the red light's on, you're on.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee. My name is Sam Farrington. I represent Rochester Ward 4. When I'm not in Concord, I'm in Durham because I'm a UNH student. I'm a junior majoring in economics, and I'm here today in strong support of the bill. I think we all know that we need safe, secure, very secure elections. And with what we saw at UNH was a lot of students from out of state, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York. They're eligible to vote in New Hampshire because they can present their student ID. And I support the bill because it would get rid of that and move it so that New Hampshire voters have a say in New Hampshire elections, and we are choosing our candidates to represent New Hampshire. And in reference to Senator Lang's questions, I think half of UNH is from New Hampshire. I think a quarter of UNH students are from Massachusetts, and then other New England, Northeast states with lower percents. But yeah, just the point of the bill is to focus on our elections so that New Hampshire voters are determining the outcomes that we have here in New Hampshire. And with that, I would take any questions.
Questions? Senator Perkins-Coker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative. Are you familiar with the state statute rules around domicile? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so domicile, it's very vague as currently written, and we need to get rid of the ambiguity, and it needs to be cleared up so that only New Hampshire voters, people that live in New Hampshire, not out-of-state people, are voting in our elections.
Follow up, if I may, Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Domicile is a test that's usually done on intent to stay. So do you think it can be clearly written into statute what someone's intent to stay is?
When you're in college, you're going for a 4-year education, and there's no restriction that you need to work in that state after you graduate. And so with domicile, in that sense, domicile doesn't apply to college from my perspective.
Thank you, Chair.
Senator Lang.
I'm just going to follow that train of thought. So intent to stay, wouldn't you agree that a valid exercise of an intent to stay would be to follow the rest of the laws of the state and get your driver's license, get your vehicle registered? Those kind of things would show intent.
That seems logical.
And if you don't do that, would it also indicate it's probably not intent to stay?
I would say so.
Thank you.
Senator Brooks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the first section of this bill, Roman numeral, no, actually number 1, or section 1. To receive in-state rates, such persons shall submit to the board proof of registration to vote prior to the beginning of academic year. If that was enacted, we've heard testimony that would put a significant strain on the university system. Are you worried that your tuition rates would be affected if that section were to pass?
Section 1,
Yes. Lines 6 and 7.
in regards to in-state tuition. No, no.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There was one other person who signed the list, was opposed, did not wish to speak. There's online, the support was 262, opposed was 268. And with that, we'll close the public hearing. Okay. Do we have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Oh. See, I almost got it. Here, take this folder and give me back.
Thank you.
Everything but the sign-in sheet. All right. All right, on the list of bills to be exact, we've got 44, relative to hand counts of ballots in an election.
Well, in the absence of another motion, Chair, I'll move ITL.
We have a motion of ITL. They want me to take seconds. Not that we have to take seconds, but they want me to take seconds. Did I phrase that the way they want it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll second.
So we have a motion of ITL made by Senator Perkins Cuoco, seconded by Senator Long. Personally, I still would like to play with this one a little longer. Because there's an underlying issue out there that I think that we could use this bill to address. So I will be voting against the ITL motion. Is there any other discussion?
So again, I also, I'll be joining you in the ITL, in opposing the ITL motion. Again, I don't have a problem with the concept of the bill. I think the hard number of 100 voters is problematic. And I think we should probably take some time and see if there's a way of solving that. In some towns, we couldn't even get to 100 if it's necessary. You don't have that many voters in the town. Just starting to look at things like way up north, where they have less than 100 voters in a given community. This law would just not, they would never be able to request a hand count. So, but I do think that there may be a mechanism available by using percentages with a very low number. But I'm going to join you because I want to take time to think about the possibility of that and what else we might do.
Additional discussion?
Yeah, if I could.
Senator Long?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For example, in the city of Manchester, 100 voters of one ward could deem that we recount all the wards. And that, to me, would be problematic. It's not specific to wards, it's specific to an election, which a person in Ward 1 was at the election and voted, and you could get 100 people to request that the whole city of Manchester, all 12 wards, would be hand counted. And I find that problematic.
Further discussion? All those in favor of ITL say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
And I'm going to put this one on hold. All right. Next one on the list is 46. Establishing municipalities allowed land impact new construction. Again, I think that one is something that we need to hold on to for a while.
So, Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure everyone got, there's an amendment by Senator Ward, amendment number 291S. I haven't had time to read the amendment, so I appreciate if we could hold this, but they're a pretty significant amendment that we probably should take some time to read and see its implication.
Agree with that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that one is still on hold. 103, relative to number of polling stations. Again, I think that one is, if we're going to do anything with it, it needs to work. Certainly, the number of registered voters is not the only thing that I would cite that would have a thing. If a community has some kind of situation where they can provide the parking, they can provide the voting booths, they can provide, that would be useful guidance, but that's not in the bill right now. So anyone object to the holds? Seeing none, we'll go on to 12. And we have an amendment from Senator Perkins Poca.
Mr. Chair, I move OTP on the bill.
Senator Perkins Poca
Second.
moves OTP.
And I'll
seconded by
move
Senator Roachford.
my amendment, S 2025-0315S, and I'll speak to it. if I may.
And she moves her amendment 0315S.
I'll second
Go ahead.
that if you need a second for that.
Yep.
Thank you, Senator. And this is an amendment that I worked with the Deputy Secretary of State who came to testify at our hearing about. She has reviewed and approved this language, and I believe I circulated it to
Yes.
Senator Rocheford's office as well. So it should reflect the corrections raised in hearing and does nothing else.
Discussion on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Count 5-0. And now we have the original bill as amended. Further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Move consent.
Second.
And we're going to have consent.
And who will take it out? So
Um,
I'm happy
who
to.
was the prime?
I was the prime. I'm whatever.
Happy to have you too as
Yeah,
well.
that's fine. I can do that.
Senator Roachford will take it up.
My first one.
Woohoo.
Uh-oh. Hopefully I don't get into trouble there.
All
I'll
right.
kick you under the table, don't worry about it.
Just to anticipate you, Mr. Chair, I do have some ideas on 213 I'd like a little time to work on and talk
Okay.
to my fellow colleagues on the committee about.
You're gonna get back to me because I certainly will be interested in what you do to that one.
Thank you.
So that one is on hold. My note said an amendment to allow verification by notary. That section was one of the ones that was in there.
Yes, sir. I will certainly discuss it with you.
All right. Then we have the bills that we heard this morning, right? All right. The first one we heard was acquiring the Secretary of State to membership.
Mr. Chair, I move ITL.
Second.
I can speak to my motion.
Yeah, just let me
So-
make sure I get the right folder up here. Too many folders, not enough fingers, I guess. Go ahead.
So again, my concern with this bill again is some of the mandatory requirements required by Eric, the 60-day data dump. That's continuous and ongoing, a mandatory data dump of both voter registration, which I don't necessarily might not mind, but the driver's license information that maybe involve people who've never voted before, but we're going to give up the data to a voter registration system. Again, I'm concerned about New Hampshire citizens' privacy and what happened at, we've already had one system that's been compromised and data was lost. Once we give that data out, we have no control over what happens to it, and we're on a majority of vote of the other states, but they want to do it in New Hampshire data, which I don't think is good intent for the citizens. I was encouraged by the Secretary of State's comments that he's already entered into an engagement with the state of Massachusetts in conversation about how to share that data, considering 44% of our migration is into the state is from Massachusetts. I think that'll take care of the vast majority, significant majority to help to make sure that the voter rolls stay safe and secure and accurate. And for those reasons, I'm going to be voting ITL.
Thank you, Senator. And for the record, I did second that. I want to bring up one thing that happened in the previous election. A particular representative from Durham said that his mother died just prior to the election. And he talked about that there wasn't time to purge her from the voter rolls. That is absolutely not correct. Her name was taken off the voter rolls prior to the election, and the absentee ballot that she did cast was removed from the system before it was open. Unbeknownst to him, it's just the system that we have does it and can do it very quickly, especially around the time of the election. So that's an example where if a person dies in state, that we have the processes to do it. The difficulty comes, especially during the wintertime when the snowbirds go to Florida, Arizona, Tennessee, and the other localities, that it does take some time for that information to come back. But there are 30-day letters and different things that people report that. There are other ways, permanent changes of addresses from the post office that the secretary talked about. And for those reasons, I think the system, especially with changes that we made on the frequency of how often we're looking at the rolls, that I can support that ITL. Additional comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for your comments. You know, I think we all share the goal of having up-to-date voter rolls, and I support what you've both said in terms of our elections being secure and there being existing systems to do this. But I also think it's important to note that this is a technology that uses secure transmission of data. It would require interagency cooperation, but it also would make our voting systems more efficient. Yes, we might be able to address the 44% of people inbound from Massachusetts, but what about the other 56% of voters that we need to make sure we're addressing? Yes, we can look at the Postal Service. Yes, we can do all these sort of one-off things, but you know, there is a system that 35 states have adopted that you know, at one time or another would serve the same purpose and at really a very minimal cost to the state. Again, to restate, you know, the initial fee estimated here is $25,000. So I respectfully hear the concerns raised by you guys. I don't feel we've fully accounted for any other way to make sure our rules are as accurate as if we adopted this, and I hope we'll consider this in the future and just continue to learn more about it.
Further discussion? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I did hear testimony from the Secretary of State saying that the 20 or whatever number that's involved with this sort of set what's required. So with respect to the 60-day dump, that could be managed. I'm sure the other states aren't happy with a 60, I would suspect. And as far as confidentiality, they could make it more demanding for confidentiality. So, and I think, you know, at a time where there's a lot of talk on fraud, I think another avenue with which to have something to check that would be sufficient, would help defray that talk. So I'd be opposed to ITL.
Senator Lane.
Again, one last thing. My other concern was the fact that, again, their membership has reduced from 35 states to their high to currently 22 states. And that trend of states moving away from the ERIC system and have the state to invest in the system now, when the trend is that fewer and fewer states are participating, seems problematic. We probably should wait and see what that looks like going forward. If more states keep withdrawing, then it's not a valid system anymore. You know, I don't know that we have a high population of people moving here from, say, Indiana who participates, what the value of that would be. So again, my concern is, again, the trending on that organization is that states are moving away from it, not to it. And given that, I don't think it's a wise investment for New Hampshire to do a system that's getting less and less reliant.
Yeah.
Senator Perkins Coker.
Thank you, Chair. Respectfully, you know, the reason we've seen people withdrawing seems to be politically motivated. So that's, you know, it's essentially a circular argument. If we're going to not join for political reasons because other people are withdrawing for political reasons, we're simply playing politics with our elections. So again, this should be something that's a bipartisan goal. I look forward to working together with you guys, but states that are acting in contravention to their quality local officials for headlines, that's not a reason for us not to join this system.
I have been working on this issue since, I believe it's 2013, when I was first on election law in the House of Representatives. I favored the cross-check program because of what it did. The years that we used the cross-check program, because of other requirements in state statute and the amount of data that we could provide them legally, limited the effectiveness of that program. So in a state where right now, I believe you would need additional legislation to allow the use of the DMV records to actually be sent somewhere, because I can't even get them to send the DMV records to the Secretary of State for verification of voter rolls at this present time, that this bill falls short of that also. And so it is not politically motivated on my side one way or the other. It's after more than 10 years of experience with these systems and looking at them and reviewing them and trying to figure out what is good for the state and what we can and cannot do per our privacy agreements, and our, privacy is now in the Constitution. So again, for all of those reasons and not political reasons, I cannot support this bill. And further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is ITL. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The vote is 3-2. And
Mr. Chair, unless you want to take it out, take it out.
okay, you can take it on. Objection to consent?
I'd prefer it not to be on consent. Thank you.
I thought that, but I wanted to ask. All right. 220, public hearings and deliberation for denial of tax exemptions.
We're gonna hold that one, Mr. Chair. I think that this prime sponsor asked us to re-refer it, so he could work on some language. I think you told him he has until crossover day to get something done.
Yep, certainly I'm not a big favor of referring bills, because if I don't have time to work on them now, I don't, know that it'll give me more time in the future. So is there any objection to holding on that one?
Gotcha.
Seeing none, we'll continue on. Yes. $225. All right. 225. Requiring public notice before reassessment. I find myself on this particular bill agreeing with both sides, okay? That, the reassessment in Rochester certainly made the statewide news because of a particular section of the population and their living stance and how much the assessments of their buildings went up. Looking at the assessment process, the way we have it, looking at other things. So I would.
So, Mr. Chair, I agree with the bill, actually. I just not the timeline in the bill. Again, I think citizens deserve the right to know as much in advance when their changes to their taxes are going to happen. This isn't a surprise when it comes to what a municipality's requirements are. They know they have to assess, so they can adjust and adapt. But I'd be inclined to do a committee amendment and change the 90 days to 45 days, which was what the assessor said was his outside edge, was 45 days, to say at least 45 days before a change. in the final bill, they have to notice the taxpayer of the change in valuation, so that if the citizen wants to come in and appeal or find out why, just ask questions, they have timeline before they get their first tax bill. So I think it's reasonable to give citizen notice and of this change for the purpose of their taxes. And I'd be inclined, if the committee was, to change that to 45 days and pass it.
All right, I would like to see that one in writing before we do it, so that it's clear in case there's anything else that you
Well,
would like.
I also want to be respectful of the rest of the committee. If I got 4 no's, I'm not going to bother the OLS with an amendment. So if what we think of that idea of going to a 30 or 45 day, I prefer 45 day number.
Senator Long, you wanted to weigh in?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's, the fact that a municipality would send out a letter saying you got 7 days to make a move. 7 days is just not enough time to do that. I know in the city of Manchester, we're way up front with respect to revals. So there's not an issue of nobody, I mean, there are issues with people with their revals going up, but not that it was a lack of notice. So I was surprised to hear that given 7 days, and I don't think that's right. I think transparency should show people what, what your taxes will be going up and what options you have, and give them more than 7 days. So I would agree with a 45 day.
Certainly, I can attest to that the assessors are in short supply. The city of Rochester seems to be a good stepping stone. We'll outbid somebody, and then, 6 months later, a year later, we'll get outbid for that same person. I think we're on our 4th assessor in 3 years. But I would like to see that one in writing and see if there's other language that we could work at. And certainly Mr. Michoud and Senator Avard would be good ones to vet that through. All right, and then we have 223. In 223, along with the testimony, I do not think that 664.1 is all that unclear, because it's the intent. It's what I feel inside me. It's and coming from a military background, my father didn't move our family here until he got stationed at Pease in 1964, just a few years before I entered high school. And for a lot of families like that, where did I call home? It's, until I became 18, I called home where my mother and father were, but that's not what 664.1 says. It's where I feel what home is. I don't want a separate distinction between the what a university student has to prove for domicile and what somebody else does. So when somebody asks me, where do I come from, I might say Erie, Pennsylvania, but I have no cognitive recollection of anything in Erie other than when I've gone back to drive by the old house with either my folks or siblings and stuff. So I think that we need to think about 664. If somebody has suggestions, certainly come see me. And the question of whether or not to use student IDs as a form of identification, I'm not sure whether the law says it right now, but even a large employer in the state, we were used to take those, and I'm not sure that we still do or don't do it, because what I'm trying to prove is identity, and proof. I believe the standard for that proof is is more likely than not. And I believe that that student ID, especially if it comes from the university system or a local high school or whatever, is probably met. But we'll hold on to it. Further comments on that one?
I think that this bill is trying to get after a bigger issue, and I don't necessarily, I would agree with you in that a student ID is there's a standard that has to be met in order to get that. I don't know if this is going to necessarily get at the issue that's desired. And then you throw in this tuition, it just confuses. I think we can talk about this. Plenty here to work with, I think, to pick apart.
So if there's something that you guys think would be beneficial for me to consider, I will take the action to either address that one or bring it back and say, I give up. And we'll go from there. Anything else to come before us today? Okay, have we scheduled next week now? We've scheduled next week, right?
we have not.
All right. So how many more bills do we have, Jessica?
We have.
Just while she's looking that up. Is the 9:15 working for everybody? It gives us a chance to caucus at 9, prior to coming over here, and still, start 9:15, 9:20.
Gives me a couple extra minutes for little tiny sneakers. It's appreciated.
All right, all right. Do they have Skechers for kids so that you don't have to Velcro or tie? Just slip 'em on?
My 3-month-old, when I put her sneakers on now, she goes, because she's used to hearing me make that noise.
We have 10 left. All right, so we'll do 4. And how many of those 10 are FNs? Did you count? All right, the chair of finance will be happy with that. All right, with that, do I have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, and our business today being complete, we are adjourned.